What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. Alright, so Aaron, I told you I would do a video on an 80s legend. So today I'm going to talk about Adrian Dantley. And Adrian Dantley is one of those unique basketball players that I loved reading about as a kid. And I like these unique basketball players for some reason. You know, the guys that, despite certain, perceived disadvantages, they actually excelled. You know, like Allen Iverson, even though he was only 5'11" outside of shoe, without shoes on, 6 feet with his shoes on, he was one of the most prolific scorers in the history of the NBA. Or Randy Smith with the Buffalo Braves. He was only 6'3", but he played the small forward position, and he kills and napalms and ethers the argument of today's younger crowd who say, "Oh, the players back then were athletic." Randy Smith was only 6'3", played the small forward position for the Buffalo Braves, the then Buffalo Braves, and with his quickness and athleticism, the guy had a vertical leap of over 40 inches. And he killed it at that position and was once the all-time Iron Man in the NBA before his record was broken by AC Green. He broke the former Iron Man record, which was held by longtime Bulls announcer Johnny Kerr. And I think Johnny Kerr broke, if I'm not mistaken, the record that was held by Dolph Shades before that, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, back to Adrian Dantley. All right, Adrian Dantley is one of the most celebrated and also most criticized and misunderstood basketball players in NBA history. You know what I'm saying? I personally only vaguely remember Dantley, and that's because I remember him with the Mavericks, and I remember him maybe with the Bucks or something like that. But I do remember him with the Mavericks, but he was not the same player. But I remember the praise that the announcers gave him and talked about how his career was Hall of Fame worthy. So I knew that at one point this was a great basketball player. And he certainly was. And the fact it took him that long, 16 years, I believe, to get into the Hall of Fame was ridiculous. But, that's how it is sometimes with writers, or people who are voting. If they perceive you to be, a mean person, then that's how they punish you. Adrian Dantley was not a mean person. He just wasn't a phony. He wasn't going to give you phony smiles. And, sometimes when you're one of us and you don't smile, it's perceived as having an attitude. And it's when, as they did with Barry Bonds, as they done with a lot of people, Terrell Owens, if you are one of us and you're seen as a problem, they get you back in the end when it comes to your post-career honors. That's their get back. But anyway, Adrian Dantley was born in Washington, D.C. in 1955, and immediately he was drawn to basketball. In high school, if I'm not mistaken, I remember reading that Adrian Dantley played the center position. All right? This would be key later on for what made him so unique. He attended DeMatha High in Hyattsville, Maryland. And during his tenure there, of the 59 games he played in high school, his team won 57 of those games. After high school, Adrian Dantley attended and played at Notre Dame. And during his tenure at Notre Dame, he was very prolific. In his first year, he played 3 years there. His first year, he averaged 18 points and 9 rebounds and shot 56% from the floor. In his second year, his scoring average soared to 30 points a game, and he averaged 10 rebounds and shot 54% from the floor. His third season, he averaged 29 points to go along with 10 rebounds and shot an astronomical 59% from the floor. In 1976, Adrian Dantley played on the gold medal winning U.S. Olympic American team. In the gold medal game, he scored a whopping 30 points in just 30 minutes of play. Adrian Dantley was a first-round pick of the Buffalo Braves. Now, at the time, the Buffalo Braves were one of those teams that you thought were going to become something. As a matter of fact, in his first year with the Buffalo Braves, Adrian Dantley was the Rookie of the Year. He was the third Rookie of the Year in 5 years for the franchise, following the legendary Bob McAdoo and the forgotten, but great ball player, the Italian stallion, Ernie DiGregorio. All right? So he followed Bob and he followed the Italian stallion. I'm just calling him that, Ernie DiGregorio. But at that time, if I'm not mistaken, I think the Buffalo Braves were having some financial difficulties. And I think the year after he won Rookie of the Year is when he was traded. And I think that's when they moved from Buffalo to San Diego. So it was during that time that they pretty much just broke the team up anyway. Because if I'm not mistaken, I think Bob McAdoo started having injuries at that time. I think he started having injuries, which would ultimately, hurt him. You know what I'm saying? Like, if not for these injuries, I think Bob McAdoo would have been a top 20 all-time player. But they pretty much broke up the team. They kept, I think, certain guys like Randy Smith. But essentially, McAdoo was traded. Excuse me, not McAdoo. McAdoo went to the Knicks. Dantley was traded for, I think what was his name? Billy Knight. Billy Knight with the Indiana Pacers, I believe. And he spent some games there. But I think later on that season, he was traded to the Lakers. Talking about Dantley. He was traded to the Lakers, I think later that season. And while he played okay there, they already had Jamal Wilkes at the small forward position, so they were going to have to get rid of one of them. And because of the fact that Dantley kind of needed the ball more, they settled with Wilkes, and they traded Dantley to the Utah Jazz. All right? I think they traded him for Spencer Haywood, if I'm not mistaken. And it was there that Adrian Dantley, now who could be the primary scorer, not having to be a secondary scorer to anybody, it was there after the Pete Maravich era that Adrian Dantley soared. During the 1979-1980 season, Adrian Dantley averaged a whopping 28 points per game. And the next year, 1980-81, he won his first scoring title, averaging over 30 points per game. And he was very, very, very proficient at getting to the foul line. I can't remember what year. I think it was that year. I think it was the 80-81 season. It was either 80-81 or 83-84, but I want to say it was 80-81. One of those years, Dantley actually had more free throws made than field goals attempted. I remember when I was a kid looking at the numbers and being amazed by that, because usually you make more fouls, you make more field goals than free throws, even if you are a prolific free throw shooter. But one of those years, Dantley had 802 made field goals and 813 made free throws. That's ridiculous. Ridiculous amount of free throws made. But that was his game. Adrian Dantley had a very unique game. He was 6'5". He was 210, maybe 215 pounds, but he played the small forward position. To me, if you ask me, what type of player he was, I saw him as a hybrid. I think he was sort of a mixture of maybe James Harden in some ways, Carmelo Anthony as far as the mid-range, and maybe a little bit of Barkley as far as his ability to score in the post. That came from his experience that I mentioned earlier in high school. All right, in high school, Adrian Dantley learned how to play in the post. And that core strength that he had, plus the footwork, he was able to post up guys who were 6'11", 7 feet and over. Even a guy like Kareem was able to post him up and score on him. It was amazing. And, for a 6-year stretch from 1980 to 1986, Adrian Dantley averaged 29.6 points per game. 29.6 points per game. During a 10-year stretch from 1979 until 1989, all right, Dantley averaged 26.5 points, 5.4 rebounds, 3.2 assists, shot an amazing 55% from the floor. Now, mind you, centers, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who's almost exclusively in the paint, shot 55.9% for his career. Kevin McHale shot 55% from the floor. Okay? Robert Parrish, a center, I believe shot 53% from the floor. Olajuwon, 51%. Barkley, 54.2%, if I'm not mistaken. Karl Malone, maybe like 51.5%. All these post guys, some of them shot a lower percentage than Dantley, a guy who was 6'5" and 210 or so pounds. He was an amazing player, but there were criticisms of him. Okay, there were criticisms of him. Some people felt that he was selfish. You know what I'm saying? That he only cared about his numbers, that he only cared about scoring. He didn't commit himself to the defensive end. Do I feel any of that is true? Look, I think that Dantley's defense was not great, but I don't think it was as bad as some people have made it out to be. And I think also you have to remember this. Everybody is not a freak of nature like a Jordan, okay, where he has this freakish energy to score 44 points in 40 minutes and also play lockdown defense. Most guys don't have that type of energy. All right. If you're a number one scoring option, you kind of have to preserve yourself defensively. So, and even with Jordan, we saw that as he aged in the second three-peat, Pippen more and more accepted the bigger offensive threats, while Jordan took the guy who may not score as much to preserve Mike offensively. And doing this, however, Scotty's offense began to suffer. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, I'm digressing. Speaking of Chicago, Adrian Dantley's career high was 57 points, which he did during the 82-83 season against the pre-Jordan Chicago Bulls, which consisted of Dave Corzine, who else was on that team? Orlando Woolridge, Reggie Theus, and Quinn Daly. Quinn Daly. I always fuck his name up sometimes. Quentin Daly. That's it. Quentin Daly. So, I want to say he had 2 57-point games, but I know he had that 57-point game against the Bulls. But I almost want to say he had another 57-point game, but no. I know what it was. He had that 57-point game against the Bulls, and I think he had another 50-point game against the Bulls later on. So he was the Bulls killer, Adrian Dantley. You know what I'm saying? He killed the Chicago Bulls. But for all of his individual brilliance, the Utah Jazz, with Ricky Green as the point guard, you know, and Adrian Dantley doing all the scoring, that combination did not work very well. And he and Frank Layden, who was the coach before Jerry Sloan, they were starting not to get along very well. And more, John Stockton, young Johnny Stockton from Gonzaga, was starting to get more minutes over little Ricky Green. And young Karl Malone from Louisiana Tech was capturing the eye of Frank Layden. This combination seemed to have some promise. So, Adrian Dantley was traded to the Detroit Pistons. And this was, along with, my opinion, the acquisitions of Dennis Rodman and John Salley in '86, and the acquisition via trade of Adrian Dantley, is what turned the Detroit Pistons around. Sorry, Carcino. Not the guy you think is the greatest player of all time, Isaiah Thomas. Now, Isaiah Thomas is, to me, probably the third greatest point guard of all time behind Magic and Oscar. Okay? Third greatest. But it was those acquisitions that made the Pistons a dynasty in the making. All right? But this is the problem. AD was a beast. All right? It was that season, 86-87, where AD and the Celtics battled for the NBA Finals berth. And I think it was, oh my God, what game was it? Game 6, where AD was knocked unconscious. And maybe if they had AD for the remainder of the series, maybe they would have won. But you know, the according to Carcino the GOAT, Zeke turned the fucking ball over. You know what I'm saying? And gave Bird and the Celtics new life in Game 5, whatever. But the very next year, the Pistons went to the NBA Finals. And, you know, gotta give it to Zeke. You know, he had a brilliant performance in Game 6. Game 7, despite the fact that Isaiah Thomas was injured, and despite that phantom call, you know, the Pistons narrowly, air quotes, lost to the Lakers in 7. But the Lakers, who were rolling through the playoffs in '89, beat a very potent Suns team, swept them. Looked like it was going to be another, you know, battle for NBA supremacy in '89, but then Byron Scott and Magic Johnson went down with injuries, and it was an easy 4-game sweep for the Detroit Pistons, and they won a title that year. But before that, you know, Dantley was jettisoned again and denied an NBA championship. Why? Me personally, I think that AD's personality rubs some people the wrong way. He's not the type of person to kiss your ass. Okay? He's just not. He's not the type of person to kiss your ass. And I think that, AD was a star in his own right. AD was the face of a franchise. Okay? He was not going to kiss Isaiah Thomas's ass. And Isaiah Thomas, to me, machinated. By that I mean conspired to have AD traded for his good buddy that he grew up with, Mark Aguirre. Okay? Mark Aguirre came over and he won 2 NBA championships with the Pistons. But, Mark Aguirre it was a very good player. Had some great years with the Dallas Mavericks. But he's not the same type of player, in my opinion, and most people's opinion. He was not the same player. He's not the same level as Adrian Dantley. Adrian Dantley is what turned that franchise around. You know what I'm saying? AD ball worked a lot. You know what I'm saying? Yes, the Pistons, usually used a 3-guard rotation, but AD ball worked a lot. And it's worth noting that during those playoff runs, if I'm not mistaken, Adrian Dantley led the team in scoring because it worked. But it's fucked up because I can understand why Adrian Dantley to this day is hurt about what happened with him with the Detroit Pistons, because he was robbed of a championship. And he helped to turn that franchise around. And then to have that fucking snake Isaiah Thomas do what he did. Don't get me wrong, Isaiah Thomas is alright in some ways, but there's some similarities, in my opinion, between Isaiah Thomas and LeBron James in some ways, all right? In a lot of ways, they're good people, but in other ways, they do some fucked up shit. You know what I'm saying? When it comes to, like, behind the scenes politics shit. But afterwards, Adrian Dantley wound his career down with the Dallas Mavericks and I think the Milwaukee Bucks. And I think it was before the 91-92 season. I think it was before the 91-92 season. Adrian Dantley called it quits. When he retired, I believe he had 23,000, what was it? Was it 177 points? I think it was 177 points. I know he averaged 24.3 points per game for his career, which is pretty much on par with Carmelo Anthony. It should not have taken him 15 years, or whatever it took, 16 years for him to get to the Hall of Fame. It shouldn't have taken that. I believe he spent about 7 or 8 years as a Denver Nuggets assistant coach. Briefly, when George Karl was going through his cancer ordeal, he took over as head coach of the Denver Nuggets. And, AD is AD, man. You know what I'm saying? I remember a couple of years ago in the news, people were ridiculing him because he had became a crossing guard or some shit like that. And AD don't give a fuck about, I told you, like, AD don't give a fuck about what people think about him. If that's something he want to do, he's going to do it. Oh, man, he must hurt. He's not hurting for fucking money. Do you know what those NBA players' pensions look like? The man played 16, 15 years. He's not hurting. He probably just wanted to do it. You know what I'm saying? If I'm not mistaken, I think he said something about the NBA didn't at the time have some type of health care coverage or something like that for older players. They got a pension, but they didn't have health care or something, so that's why he took the job or something like that. But at the end of the day, you know what I'm saying, I'm sure Adrian Dantley is not hurting for money. I'm sure. I know that's not the case. But anyway, Adrian Dantley to me is, if I have to rank the small forwards of the 1980s, top four, I guess. I would have Larry Bird, number one. Number two, I guess I would go with Julius Erving, although, he kind of is also part of the 70s, but he did win a title in 83, so I would go with Julius Erving, number two. Number three, I would probably go with, maybe Dominique Wilkins. Number four, I'd say AD. And number five, Alex English. Even though Alex English is the all-time leading scorer in 80s, basketball, but yeah, you could put Alex English ahead of AD too, I guess. I guess, because you could say that English was a more well-rounded player, I guess. So 4 or 5. AD is the top 5 small forward, in the 80s. I'll put it like that. So the guy was a great basketball player, and he doesn't get that recognition that I think he should get. You know what I'm saying? There are a lot of guys that don't get the recognition that some of these other guys get, and part of it is it's the media. They don't have the same people in place anymore. And sports media used to have actual sports historians that know what the fuck they're talking about. Now you have a bunch of pretty faces, that are there for ratings purposes, and they only read what the fuck is in front of them. They don't do really any type of investigating. They don't try to learn any fucking thing. And to be honest with you, a lot of these people, you and I can have a conversation with them, even though they're doing this shit professionally, getting paid handsomely for it. They can't really carry a conversation past what the fuck they grew up with. You know what I'm saying? With the exception of a few. And then some of them, they show so much obvious bias, it's ridiculous. But I will never do that. You know what I'm saying? Not on this channel. So that's pretty much it, man. Adrian Dantley's a great player, man, and I'm glad he finally made the Hall of Fame. I really wish there was some way that the Detroit Pistons could show their appreciation for him, because I know that he still harbors a lot of resentments toward the organization. But it is what it is. Tell me what you guys think.